What's up, YouTube? You can call me Smooth. I'm what you would call a professional hacker. Companies pay me to break into their computer systems and tell them how I did it. On this YouTube channel, which I just started, I'm going to give you a glimpse into what it looks like to live the life of a professional hacker. I'm going to teach you how to do what I do and how to think like I think. And hopefully, you will gain enough knowledge to do so yourself. Let's just get right into this video. Now, I'm assuming you clicked this video because you expected me to give you one answer on how you can hack any computer in the world. And that's not what I'm going to give you, because there's no such thing. There's not a specific way to gain access to every computer in the world that is universal. However, I am going to teach you the approach that somebody might take to actually hack any computer system or web service or anything that you can find accessible in the world. So first, you want to do what's called enumeration and discovery. That essentially means I'm going to probe the device for any services that are exposed. Now, why is that important? It's important because services being exposed is what gives an attacker the ability to potentially gain access to that computer. If you've heard the term firewall, then you'll know that firewalls block open doors, essentially, and those open doors are called ports. Services run. When services run, they open those doors, they open ports, and those ports being open give attackers an avenue to attack. And so the first thing we need to do is discover what ports are open on this target system we're going to hack today. Now, this machine here on the left-hand side of the screen is called Metasploitable. And if you haven't heard of it, which I'm sure many of you have, this is a computer system that is vulnerable by design. What that means is that it's designed for novices to come and attempt to exploit it so that they can learn how to hack. So first things first, let's go ahead and run some discovery on this host. And what we're going to use to do that is a tool called nmap. Let's go ahead and type nmap-svc, which means service version. And we're going to scan, we'll just do a general scan of the IP address. And I pulled up the IP address here on the left side already because when I started my virtual machine, I needed to know what the IP address of my target is. Now, before we skip too far ahead while the scan is running, let's explain what an IP address is. An IP address is essentially an address that a computer system can send information to and expect that that computer system listening is going to respond back. You can think of an IP address as a home address, and every computer in the world has an IP address. So we want to go ahead and jump straight down here. We find some ports that were discovered. You can see here the service is what we want to pay attention to in the service version. On the left hand side you can see ports. Now FTP is a file transferring service. SSH is an access service, meaning I'm going to access this host via a protocol called SSH. So we have a lot of services running here. Now, because I used the -svc flag, it gave me all the service versions, which is what matters, because those service versions will allow me as an attacker to identify whether or not that service version is out of date. As a quick note here, the reason it's important to identify if a service version is out of date is because many times out-of-date service versions also imply that there could be vulnerabilities existent in previous service versions prior to the current version or current release of that service. So many times you'll find as an attacker that if you can discover an out-of-date service, you can quickly search if there's any vulnerabilities or exploit proof of concepts on the internet downloadable by you that you can leverage to attack the host, essentially. Alright, so since we're talking about exploiting services and not misconfigurations, let's go ahead and sort of look through this scan and see if we can identify some versions that might be out of date. I notice this VSFTP server is extremely out of date. If you look at most of these services and Google them, you'll find that they're pretty much all out of date and all contain different types of vulnerabilities. Some are remote code execution, some are privilege escalation, and there is a difference between a vulnerable service and a misconfigured service, mostly relating to the actual code itself, but a misconfiguration can oftentimes lead to compromise in similar ways as out-of-date services. So I'm going to go ahead and attack this FTP server. Let's go ahead and just see what it looks like to search this thing up. Actually, I already searched it up, but if you just straight up type that into your Google search, you're going to find a backdoor exploit that was written in 2011. Or I'm sorry, 2011. So the vulnerability was discovered in 2011, but this exploit was written just a few years ago. And if you do a little bit of research, which you should always look into what it is you're going to be attempting to exploit, what vulnerability exists. In this case, a supply chain attack occurred where a malicious attacker was able to compromise the source code repo of VSFTP and implant a backdoor. It wasn't long after that the developers were able to figure that out and remove it, but it wasn't until many people already updated to this version of FTP and were vulnerable to the backdoor. So let's go ahead and copy the code, and we're gonna go ahead and just I think I already did it, yeah. So we just straight up copied the code. If you type exploit-h, you'll see that you can just input the argument, and I didn't actually run it yet, so I don't know if this is gonna work, but let's just see what happens. And the IP address 192. Connection refused. So we may need to specify the port. Let's just make sure that this thing is actually accessible on port 21. Yes, it is. Okay, so it says shell open there the first time. Don't know why it crashed, but that is an interesting artifact. So it says that a shell opened, and you can actually see we are root on should be the .66 address. So it's strangely trivial to do this, especially when all you had to do was go Google search for a vulnerable version. Now, it's not super uncommon. In fact, as a penetration tester, this is oftentimes what occurs. Few and far between are there times where I'm actually searching for vulnerabilities unknown to the public and writing exploits for them. I will say I have done that 2 times on penetration tests because I dove deep into things that I sort of was suspicious of. I kind of felt like there were vulnerabilities in these services, and sure enough, after hunting a while, I found some and submitted them to the manufacturers, and I have a CVE for one of them. A CVE is just a tag on a vulnerability so that the public knows and has record of that software and service version having a vulnerability. So anyway, this was the first one. Once we have access to the host, we can do anything we want, especially as root. Typically, you don't exploit a service and get root all the time. Most of the time you have to do privilege escalation from whatever user you actually compromised, which is usually the context of the service running. So for example, if you have a Linux web server that's running Apache, and you find a vulnerability on the web server, whether it's in like a misconfigured WordPress or something like that, and you actually gain remote code execution on it, that Apache server is running in the context of Apache or www-data. And if you are this user, I'll just show you. you can't do things like cat etc shadow. But if I go back to I'm root again, you can, right? So I think we're going to go ahead and stop it here. I would have liked to demonstrate one more exploit, but I think you guys get the general gist of what's going on here. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I have a lot of plans in the future to disclose some private TTPs that I use in my day-to-day. Things like bypassing bot detection mechanisms on Fortune 100 companies' websites. I'm going to be explaining how I bypass enterprise-level endpoint detection and response software while writing my malware. And many other things that I know many of you would find interesting. So if you would, stick around, drop a subscription, drop a like, help me get seen by the algorithm and seen by a lot more people, and hopefully be able to demonstrate even more private techniques that most probably wouldn't want me to disclose. However, I don't care. So once again, thank you for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day. God bless. See you guys soon. Peace.